Hey, Zombie Tactics coming at you again tonight, picking up on the theme of fantasy versus reality. And I wanted to talk about another fantasy that sometimes informs our thinking that shouldn't, and something we want to kind of think about a little bit, because I don't think we think about it enough. And it has to do with the active shooter, the person who will run into a restaurant or a school or a college or a children's center, something like that, and start shooting up the place and killing all kinds of people, and how we have a idea fed to us by the media about who this person is that affects how we think we ought to deal with them. If you don't identify the problem correctly, you're never going to deal with the problem correctly. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. What I see is kind of in the popular media and sometimes even in movies. I saw a movie a while back, and it had to do with a particular real active shooter incident, and in this particular movie they portrayed all kinds of things, I think, for dramatic effect. I can't say they really had an agenda, because it didn't seem to be a giant anti-gun message to the movie or anything like that, but for dramatic effect they did a number of things in this movie that were not real if you actually study what happened in the incident. One of them was that the active shooter himself was in pretty good shape, whereas the real active shooter was terribly overweight. Well, maybe not terribly, but just not really in shape at all. And it showed him doing a number of things, like in almost a Rocky Balboa kind of cut sequence of working out and that kind of thing, of him training and working out at the range and shooting and practicing and things like that. Well, we know from the actual record that no such thing happened. This guy got some weapons by illegal means and really didn't even know what he was doing with them. And in the scenes that they handle carefully, because it's a movie for TV, they can't show you blood and gore and things like that. So they handle very tastefully him going about the active shooting incident, but in that they make him look extremely proficient with the firearms that he's handling, and extremely like he is some kind of military operator almost, that he's that skilled, that somehow this guy with no training in real life, in bad shape in real life, with no weapons training in real life, in this movie nonetheless came along as somebody that's just focused and right on and going about his business and everything like that. And I just thought how odd that is, but how many times we fall prey to that kind of idea. And it's because we get fed something by the media that kind of, every time you see a bad guy in a movie, he's almost superhuman. The most over the top example of that, of course, is the kind of Freddie Krueger and Jason and Michael Myers movies and things like that. Now, we know that those are not real, but even in movies where there are real things going on, we're much more prone to see a bad guy who is a criminal mastermind than we are someone who is kind of pathetic and stupid and uses a gun as the means to gain the power that he never got elsewhere in his life, because he just was not a very high-quality individual to begin with, or just not well put together otherwise. So we get fed that over and over again, and I think it actually affects our mindset. We start thinking that bad guys are always, they're superhuman. They're going to just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming, and there's almost nothing you can do to stop them. They're like a robot cyborg from the future. They're going to keep coming, and they will not stop until you are dead. And the reality is something completely different. I'm talking just specifically about active shooter incidents here and nothing else. I want to separate out things like people who are assassins, who go to deliberately kill some political figure, either because they're getting paid to do so or they've got a political beef. I want to separate out people who are bank robbers and career criminals who go about their business with firearms to rob a bank or to create havoc in some other way for another purpose. They're trying to rob a bank or something like that. Those kinds of people could be a completely different kind of profile than what I'm talking about. But the active shooter doesn't fit that. When you study the active shooter, the typical person that we hear about from time to time that goes off his rocker and shoots up a pancake house, or walks into a school or something like that, they're not that kind of person at all. And we don't want that to affect our thinking because it makes us think that there's nothing that we can do about it. The active shooter is typically a person who nothing really has gone right for them in their life. They haven't held down a job. They don't have friendships. They don't have relationships with the opposite sex that are of any quality, or if they have had some relationships with the opposite sex, they always go bad. So far as their experience with firearms, we'll talk about that in a second, but needless to say, these are not people who are skilled operators who have a rational view of the world and are going about pursuing their goals with some kind of proficiency. More often than not, they are people who are so frustrated with life that they want to lash out in some way to express some power or some anger that they're unable to do otherwise in their life. And that's the reason why they get a hold of an AK-47 or a Glock or whatever, because what they're doing is they are compensating for their own lack of ability by doing what the media kind of feeds as an idea, and that is you're going to buy a firearm or steal one. Half the time they get them illegally. And that's going to be the mean. I've dealt with the dogs. What was I saying? They get that firearm or that small cache of weaponry, and that's the means that they think they are going to buy what they've never been able to achieve in their life, which is any sense of power and any sense of ability to get noticed or to be somebody, to be something important. Keep in mind what they've done. They've just bought a firearm, and in many cases they don't have any idea what they're doing with it at all. We see over and over again when we watch video or we get the reports from these incidents that these folks don't know what they're doing. They fumble with the weapon. If the weapon has a malfunction, they don't know what to do with it. They're not Jason Bourne. They're not who am I thinking of? Jack Bauer. They're not any of those kinds of folks. They don't know what they're doing. And we have to remember that these are not skilled individuals, regardless of what weapon is in their hand. Dollars to donuts, they really don't know what they're doing with it. And I've seen this over and over when I've looked into these kind of reports. Now, here's what generally happens. These folks go do their shooting, whatever they're going to do. And then at that point in time, universally, this is what happens. And this is a clue to how we can deal with this as citizens. And that's something I'll be talking about more in the future. This is what happens. They walk into the restaurant, they walk into the children's center, the college, the high school, whatever. They start shooting up the place. And at some point in time, they're done. They're not done because they've actually accomplished anything, but because it becomes clear to even them that there's nothing going on. They're really, shooting these people hasn't given them the sense of power they thought that it would give them. It's just an awful mess. They might be a little crazy to begin with. And then one of a few things happens. They either run out of ammunition, or they experience bad weapons malfunction, the cops arrive, or they experience some kind of meaningful opposition to them. People start throwing rocks at them, or something. And at the point that they realize that their firearms did not turn them into this superhuman person, the superhuman that they thought that the firearms were going to turn them into, that they were going to buy the respect that they couldn't get otherwise by getting this gun and shooting up the place. I'm going to show the world. When that realization hits them, they almost to a person do the same thing over and over again. They kill themselves, or they try to kill themselves. This happens over and over again. It happened in the recent IHOP incident. It happened with the guy Loeffner who did shoot Gabriel Giffords and killed a number of people there. People don't realize that when you look at the reports, when he went to reload his Glock and he couldn't do it because he didn't know what he was really doing with the weapon, and the people rushed him and brought him to the ground. He was trying to reload his handgun, his Glock, and not shoot them. He was trying to turn it on himself, and they finally wrested the gun from him and kept him from doing that. Over and over again in active shooter incidents, we find out that they kill themselves the minute that they find out they don't have the power that they thought they were going to have, or they run out of ammunition, or they get any kind of meaningful opposition. And that's a clue to how we might want to think about these incidents as citizens. Not that we want to fall prey to the hero syndrome, as some people would call it, but that we do need to have a rational basis for thinking about these things. Our capabilities are our capabilities, and we need to have a rational view of our own capabilities and how well we've practiced and trained. We have to have an honest assessment of our own mindset, what we might be able to do in a particular incident like that. But we also have to make sure that we realize that this active shooter is not the walking, talking, fire-breathing person proficient with weaponry and hand-to-hand combat that the media and some others sometimes present him to be. The active shooter can be opposed, and he can be opposed effectively if we understand his mindset and where that puts us in the mix as armed citizens. Just a little more philosophy tonight, and we'll continue on with this as I delve deeper into fantasy versus reality. That's Zombie Tactics for tonight, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.